"You don't have to pry into my personal space," my girlfriend said when I happened to see her screen. Messages were popping up on her Apple Iwatch. The same number, the same phrases. "I miss you. When are you alone again?" I didn't want to believe it, but with every vibration of those hours, I lost what I thought was love. And then I realized we no longer have our space. She's had someone else for a long time. The hours I spent at work were long, too long, some would say. But I loved my job and I didn't mind the late nights. I wasn't out drinking with colleagues or anything like that. No, I worked. I came home late, but I came home to her, to the warmth of the house, the familiar smell of dinner on the stove, and the soft sound of her voice asking about my day. It was always the same routine, a little tiredness on her face, but nothing alarming. She had always been there for me, and I trusted her more than anything in the world. Trust was the foundation of our marriage. I thought it was the one thing we would never lose. But lately, something had shifted. She started saying things, subtle things at first, small comments. "You've been so distant lately," she would say, looking at me over her wine glass with a tilt of her head. "You're not the same anymore. I miss the way you used to be. You've become suspicious, you know that? Jealous, distrustful. It's not good." I laughed it off at first, unsure of whether it was her exhaustion talking or just a random whim. It seemed harmless. She was probably just frustrated with my long hours. She missed me, and I couldn't blame her for that. But the more she said it, the more it started to sting. I knew I had been distant. I knew I had been working more than I should. But this, accusations of jealousy, distrust, it felt like a betrayal of its own. It made me question myself, doubt myself. I wanted to believe her. I really did. I wanted to think she was just being sensitive, that she was just trying to get me to spend more time with her, to reconnect. After all, we had been together for years, decades almost, and everything had always been fine. We had our issues, sure, but who didn't? But then one night, it all changed. I had just finished a late meeting and got home at around midnight. It was dark, quiet. She was already in bed. I walked in, tried to be as quiet as possible, but the sound of the floor creaking under my feet seemed too loud in the silence of the house. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and glanced over at the counter where her smartwatch sat. It was glowing, its screen lit up in the dark. I froze. It was a message. Not just any message. A message from an unknown number. The notification on her watch was just a few words, but it was enough to make my heart skip. I didn't need to read it to know that something wasn't right. "Are you free tonight?" the message asked. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself there could be 1,000 explanations. Maybe it was a colleague, someone at work, someone with the same name, a mistake, but something in me tightened at the thought. I tried to ignore it, tried to push it down, but the seed had been planted. The seed of doubt. I didn't say anything that night. I pretended like I didn't notice. After all, I had no proof. Maybe it was nothing, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. I could feel the tension growing, the unease creeping into my chest every time I looked at her. She hadn't mentioned the message. She didn't even seem to notice it herself. Was I overreacting? Was I just imagining things? I thought about asking her, confronting her. But no, I couldn't do that. Not yet, not without more proof. So I did the only thing I knew to do. I became patient. I watched. I listened. The days that followed felt different. I couldn't quite place it, but everything seemed off. She started acting like nothing had changed. In fact, she acted like everything was fine, like we were still that perfect couple, like she hadn't sent a message to some unknown man in the middle of the night. But there was something in her eyes, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. It wasn't just the messages. It was the way she avoided eye contact when I asked about her day, the way she would pick up her phone a little too quickly whenever I walked into the room. It was the little things, but little things add up. And then one night I saw it again. The watch. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. I couldn't help but notice how casually she glanced at the screen every few seconds. It was almost like she was expecting something. I didn't know what it was, but it felt wrong. And when the ping came, a sound that made me tense instantly, She smiled just slightly before picking it up. I stood still in the doorway, pretending I didn't see. My heart was pounding, my mind racing. Who was she talking to? What was going on behind those smiles and those perfect dinners? What was really happening in the silence between us? But this time, I didn't act. I didn't confront her. I stayed still, breathed through the discomfort, and waited. Because now, I needed to be sure. And I had a feeling this wasn't the last message I would see. I decided then, in that moment, that I wasn't going to let this go. The trust I had built up for years was slowly being chipped away. The doubts, the whispers in the back of my mind, they were growing louder. I wasn't going to confront her without proof. I would gather that proof silently and wait. When the time came, I would have everything I needed. It wasn't about trust anymore. It was about truth. The truth was out there. I just had to find it. And soon enough, I would. The days stretched on, dragging behind them a haze of uncertainty. I went through the motions of our life, acting normal. Too normal. She didn't know it, but I was already beginning to distance myself, to see things through a lens I hadn't used before. I didn't want to look at her like a stranger, but slowly, that's what she was becoming. That night, when I saw her glance at her smartwatch again, the same gnawing feeling returned. The seed of doubt I had planted was beginning to take root. I didn't want to believe it, but I also knew that I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to gather proof. And to do that, I needed to think like her, like someone who had something to hide. The first step was the smartwatch itself. The next morning, I acted as if nothing had happened. She was in the kitchen preparing breakfast. The smell of bacon and eggs filled the house, an ironic contrast to the tension in the pit of my stomach. She asked me if I wanted anything, her voice soft, unaware of the growing storm inside me. "No, I'm fine," I said, keeping my tone casual, trying to sound like everything was okay. But underneath, my mind was working. I needed to figure out how the smartwatch worked, how it synced with her phone, how it stored messages. I didn't want to snoop too obviously. I wasn't ready to confront her, not yet. I wasn't ready to make her aware that I was onto something. But if I could understand the technology, I could find a way to track everything. And that's exactly what I did. The first thing I did was download the smartwatch app onto my own phone. The app synced to hers automatically when I connected it to the Wi-Fi. I could barely contain my excitement. It felt wrong, almost like an invasion of privacy. But in that moment, it felt necessary. I spent hours that night combing through the app, getting familiar with the data it stored. I learned how to view old messages, past notifications, even deleted ones. I could track the exact time her watch received any communication. It was all there, sitting on the screen in front of me. But it was still just a tool. I needed to gather more. I knew I had to be careful. I couldn't act like I was suspicious. She'd pick up on that. I had to stay calm, act like I always had, and wait for the right moments. If she thought I was watching her, she'd stop. She'd change her routine, stop leaving her phone out, stop using the watch in front of me. I needed to remain invisible. I needed to let her think that I was the man she could trust, the man who wasn't paying attention. That's when I started taking screenshots. Every time the watch received a notification, I captured it. Every time she glanced at it, every time she checked her phone, I made a note. I started collecting pieces, one at a time, building something that would one day be undeniable. I didn't just want to confront her, I wanted to expose the truth. Slowly, methodically, the pieces of the puzzle started to fall into place. A few days passed and the pattern emerged. The messages were from the same man, and they had been coming in for months. He was consistent, always texting at night, sometimes in the early morning. He called her baby sometimes, and other times he was just checking in on her. They seemed friendly enough, but there was an undeniable intimacy in their exchanges. I started to see the bigger picture. This wasn't just a one-time mistake. This had been going on for months. The texts, the messages, the late-night pings. And I wasn't just imagining it. It wasn't paranoia. It was the truth. I had to gather more, but I couldn't act hastily. I couldn't just walk up to her and accuse her. It would be too easy for her to deny it, to twist it into a story where she was the innocent one. I needed proof that she couldn't explain away. I needed evidence that would shatter everything she had built. So I began digging deeper. I accessed the camera roll on her phone, the one she always kept locked behind a fingerprint. Somehow, I'd managed to unlock it one night while she was asleep. I told myself I was doing this for the right reasons. I told myself I wasn't going overboard, but the reality was different. I had crossed a line. The photos were there, photos with him, not explicit, not overtly scandalous, but enough to show that something was happening. They were in public places, at bars, at parks, laughing, close, too close. But the real evidence was in the deleted files. I found them, hidden in a folder she thought was secure. Old photos, conversations that had been erased, messages she must have thought were gone forever. I saw their conversations in full, the ones she had deleted, the ones that were too incriminating to leave behind. It was all there. It wasn't just an affair, it was an ongoing relationship. At that moment, I realized something. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I wasn't just angry, I was cold. This wasn't about saving my marriage. It was about getting back what I had lost. Trust, respect, dignity, and I would take it all back. I wasn't going to confront her yet. Not until everything was in place. Not until I had everything I needed. But when I did confront her, there would be no denying it. She had made her choice. Now, I was making mine. The plan was simple. Don't confront her yet. Don't raise suspicions. Keep acting like everything was fine, like I didn't know. But every night, as I silently gathered my evidence, the truth became clearer and clearer. And with it came a certainty. Soon enough, she wouldn't be able to deny it. And when that time came, I would show her everything, everything. It was a strange kind of tranquility in our house that evening. I felt almost disconnected from everything, like a spectator in my own life. She was in the kitchen, bustling around preparing dinner, the sound of utensils clinking, the scent of roasting vegetables, the hum of the oven. It all felt so normal. And yet it wasn't. Not anymore. Tonight I had planned something. A dinner with her family, my family, our families, all gathered in one place. It wasn't unusual. We had done this a few times over the years. But tonight it wasn't about the food or the wine. It wasn't about small talk and catching up. No, tonight was going to be different. I needed everyone to see what I had seen, to hear the truth. I needed them to witness the woman they thought they knew for who she truly was. I kept a calm face, but inside my heart was pounding. I glanced over at her as she fussed with the table settings, humming to herself, oblivious to what was about to happen. She was smiling, as if nothing was wrong, as if her betrayal didn't hang over us like a cloud, darkening everything in its path. When everyone finally arrived, I acted like I had for months, carefree, casual. We all sat down to dinner. My parents were talking with her parents, laughing at jokes, discussing the latest news. No one suspected anything was off, no one but me. The evening felt like a strange performance. I was playing my role, and so was she. She smiled, laughed, even glanced at me a few times with that familiar warmth I had once believed was genuine. But every time she looked at me, I saw it. Just for a fraction of a second, an unreadable expression, a subtle flash of guilt, of fear. Halfway through the meal, I made my move. I stood up and clinked my glass gently. The room fell silent. "Can I have everyone's attention?" I asked, my voice steady, though my heart raced. "Sure," my father replied, raising his own glass. "What's this about?" I smiled thinly, glancing at my wife, who was now looking at me with a mixture of curiosity and slight concern. She wasn't sure what was happening, but she would soon find out. "I've been thinking," I said, trying to sound casual, "about how important family is, how we should always be there for each other, and how sometimes it's important to surprise each other, especially the ones we love." Her expression shifted, a fleeting hint of unease creeping into her eyes. But she still smiled. "You know," I continued, "I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I've come to realize something. It's not just about the things we say or the promises we make. It's about trust and loyalty, the things that really matter." The tension in the room thickened. Everyone was quiet, waiting. I could feel my pulse in my throat. I held back the urge to smile, the kind of smile you get when you know you've won, even before you've said the final word. I turned to her, locking eyes with her. The vulnerability in her gaze didn't go unnoticed. She could feel it now. She knew something was wrong. I've prepared a little surprise, I said. I wanted to share something with all of you. I think it's time everyone saw it. I pressed play on my phone, and a video began to play on the projector behind me. The faces in the room turned from curiosity to confusion as the screen flickered to life. The video began with a series of screenshots, text messages from him, the man she had been seeing. Messages that she thought were erased. But no, they were all there. His words to her, his loving comments. How many times had he asked her how her day was? How many times had he sent good night messages, just like they were in a relationship? The silence in the room was deafening. And then came the photos. Pictures of them together, smiling, holding hands at that coffee shop she used to tell me about. Pictures of them at the beach, their arms around each other, laughing in the sun. I watched her face. Her eyes were wide. Her lips trembled. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't prepared herself for the consequences. I didn't look at her anymore. I kept my eyes on my parents, her parents, on everyone. I wanted them to see it, to see the truth clearly. I wasn't just some paranoid husband. I wasn't someone who had fabricated the story in my head. I wasn't distrustful, as she had always claimed. No, I had been right. I had seen what she had done, and now they were seeing it too. I pressed pause on the video. The room was frozen. My mother looked like she had been slapped in the face. Her hands were trembling on the table, her eyes glued to the screen. My father's expression was unreadable, but I could tell he was trying to process it. Are you seeing him?" my mother finally asked her. Her voice trembled, not out of anger but shock. My wife's face had gone pale. The color drained from her. She opened her mouth but no words came out. Her mother looked at her, the same look of disbelief in her eyes. "How long has this been going on?" She started, her voice shaky. "I didn't mean, I, but I cut her off, my voice cold and even, like a blade. "You didn't mean it? You didn't mean to betray me? To lie to me for months?" I shook my head slowly, almost as if in disbelief. "You didn't mean to break my trust? To break everything we had?" She stayed silent, her head hanging low. The shame was too much to bear. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. I felt a strange sense of detachment as I stood up, raised my glass and looked around at everyone in the room. My family, her family. And I made my final statement. "Thank you for confirming," I said quietly, my voice laced with a calm finality, "that I wasn't paranoid, just a husband who believed in love for too long." As I finished speaking, I turned and walked toward the door. No one said a word. No one stopped me. Her mother started to speak, but the words caught in her throat. I left without another glance back. The following days after the dinner felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I kept the house quiet, the kind of silence that settles heavily over everything, stifling any chance of normality. The aftermath of that evening hung over us like an unspoken agreement. She knew she had been exposed, and I knew I had done what needed to be done. She didn't try to stop me when I left. She didn't beg. She didn't even attempt to explain. I think deep down she knew there was no coming back from what had been revealed. She had been exposed not just for what she did, but for the way she had played me, for the way she had turned my trust into a weapon against me. I gave her the space to process, but I wasn't going to wait around. There was nothing left to discuss. My feelings? Gone. All that remained was a cold resolve. I had been a fool for believing in the life she promised, and now I had to rebuild, to cut her out of everything. No apologies, no second chances. This wasn't a story that ended with tears and reconciliation. This was a chapter closing, and I was moving on. It was a week later when I got the call. Her voice on the other end was quieter than I had ever heard it before. "Can we talk?" she asked. Her words hit me like a slow-moving car crash. I had prepared for this moment, for the inevitable phone call where she would try to explain, try to justify her actions, try to make it all sound less like a betrayal and more like a misunderstanding. I didn't need to hear it. I wasn't interested in her excuses anymore. But there was something in her voice, something desperate that made me pause. Part of me, maybe a small, foolish part, wondered if there was anything left that could be salvaged. I don't think there's anything left to say, I replied, my voice steady but cold. I, I never meant for it to happen. It was a mistake, she pleaded. I let her talk, but I didn't listen. Not really. She said all the right things about regret, about how she was confused, how it was all just one thing leading to another. And as she spoke, I realized how empty her words were. They were words that I had once hoped to hear, but now they sounded hollow, like she was reading from a script. I've ruined everything, haven't I? She said, the quiet shame in her voice finally getting through. You ruined more than you'll ever understand, I said softly, almost to myself. I'm sorry, she whispered. I stayed silent for a long time, the weight of the moment pressing in on me. This was it. The end of everything I had believed in, everything I had once thought was real. The person I had loved, trusted, and built a life with was gone. She wasn't the woman I had married. She wasn't the woman I had shared my life with. She was someone else, someone I didn't know, and frankly, someone I didn't care to know anymore. I'm not angry, I finally said, my voice low. I'm just done. There was a long pause on the other end. I don't want you to leave, she said, her voice breaking, but I had already made up my mind. I'm not leaving, I replied, my voice firm. I'm just, moving on. A week later, I packed my things. It was strange, surreal. It felt like I was leaving a life that wasn't even mine anymore. I didn't need the house, the memories, the life we'd built. All I needed was to walk away, to find myself again in the silence. I left and I didn't look back. The papers for the divorce came soon after. There were no long, drawn-out conversations, no tears, just signatures, and everything was over. The life I had known was gone, and it wasn't coming back. And as for her, she was left with nothing. No love, no support, no one to turn to. Her family. They had distanced themselves after the dinner. Her friends. They all saw the truth now. She was alone, and it was clear that no amount of apologies or explanations would ever change what had happened. As for me, I walked away with a different kind of freedom. Not the kind I had dreamed of as a young man, but a freedom built on the knowledge that I had been right all along. I had trusted my instincts, even when everyone, her included, had tried to convince me otherwise. I had been the fool, and yet I wasn't the one who lost. When I left, I didn't just leave behind a marriage. I left behind a version of myself I no longer recognized. And in doing so, I found who I truly was. A man who had been betrayed, yes, but also a man who would never again be blinded by false promises. In the end, I didn't lose my wife. I lost a man who wasn't worth me, and that means I've only won.